So good morning, everyone. I'm going to kick off for today. My name is John Hobbs. I'm a senior lecturer in the Cork Institute of Technology, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this webinar, which focuses really on RIS3 collaboration and clustering. So just to explain where I'm based and where we would all be based if everything was happening properly and there was no coronavirus. So we're based here in Cork, down the very south of Ireland in the Cork Institute of Technology. It's a beautiful place. We have lots of beautiful scenery here and skyscapes, but a little bit dull, overcast and horrible today. So probably best that we're meeting remotely this morning. So I'm based at the Cork Institute of Technology and we're partners on the ecoRIS project. I'm on the top right of this picture on your screen. So in the Bishopstown campus, we have 4 campuses as part of the Cork Institute of Technology. So we have our Naval College, we have our College of Art and Design and our School of Music as well. But as I mentioned, I'm sitting here today on campus in the Bishopstown campus here in CIT, where we run the ecoRIS project from. So as I mentioned, we have an action-packed agenda for you. So we have lots of different interventions. So Yesenia Otamendi, my colleague from the ecoRIS project, is going to give a broad overview of what ecoRIS is and what we've been trying to do over the last number of years as we're implementing this Interreg Europe project. And then we have 2 expert interventions on the growing importance of smart specialization and what that means, I suppose, for Europe and further afield, even internationally, how different countries are picking up RIS3 as we move. And we also have some Irish perspectives. So because this workshop would have been in Ireland and we would have been meeting face to face here, we have Karen Collin, who's kindly agreed to join us from the Southern Regional Assembly to explain, I suppose, how RIS3 is growing in popularity in Ireland and how it's becoming part of our policy agenda. So after those 2 expert interventions, we'll have some questions and answers, which will be a great opportunity for all of our attendees to put questions to our experts. And after that point, we're going to learn a little bit more about the ecoRIS 3 project in terms of how the regional action plans that we've developed are being implemented across all of our different regions. So you'll hear from Spain, from myself about the situation in Ireland. You'll hear about what's happening in Portugal, in Lithuania, in Finland, in Italy and Latvia. And again, we'll have a point there where attendees can ask questions of our partners to see how their action plans are being implemented. And finally, we just have some top tips from our partner, Tamara Espinera from Atlantic Cities, who's going to tell us how to take opportunities of connecting with Horizon 2020 and Interreg Europe programs. So how to get involved, I suppose, in the EU innovation opportunities. So the final little bit of guidance I have before we start this morning is it would be great if you could follow us and share some of the learnings or things that you're picking up on Twitter. So we're at ecoRIS3 project if you want to add us and share some of your comments or views or images from the webinar this morning as we're meeting. And the second option for you to participate is we have a questions and answers function at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on which device you're using. So you can leave your questions there. We'll have some of our project partners will be answering those questions live as we go through the webinar, or those that can't be answered in text format. If they're for our participants, then they'll be able to answer those questions within the Q&A session live. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to Yesenia to let her take over and introduce the ecoRIS project. So over to you, Yesenia.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, John, and thank you, Cork Institute of Technology, for organizing this workshop. As you said, it was meant to be in Cork, so we are today virtually filling in Cork. And yeah, before moving forward to get more details about each action plan and the different presentations the speakers will provide, we wanted to, as coordinators of the project, we wanted to give some highlights of what it is ecoRIS3 and just to frame it so you better understand where we are. So ecoRIS3 project, it is a 5-year project. It's a 5-year cooperation project, interregional project between 8 partners in 8 countries, and we will check them later. The goal is to have concrete measures and policies to generate these interactions between the local and regional innovation ecosystems together with the RIS3 strategies. How are we looking at that? We are having an integral approach, looking at 4 elements, which are basic and crucial to strengthen those ecosystems, looking at public sector, the industry, research and development and academia, and civil society. It is very important to have an active involvement of the key stakeholders and also the managing authorities in the whole journey that we started in 2017. John, the next one, please. Here, the partnership, it is, well, as I said, 8 partners from 8 different regions. As you said before, John, we are, well, you can see most of the countries in Europe are in this partnership. Us as coordinators, Cork Institute of Technology from Ireland, Indoave from Portugal, Sunrise Valley from Vilnius, Lithuania, Kainu from Finland, Città Metropolitana di Torino in Italy, Bitseme from Latvia, and the Conference of Atlantic City, the network from France. So the operational objectives of the project are 3. Next one, John. So the goal, it is we're looking at 3 elements, very basic in the project, and we will see the outcomes now with the action plan. The first one, it is to identify those challenges and gaps that the project had, and it's already there, each region had, in order to enhance these innovation ecosystems, always looking at these RIS3 strategies in each region. How we were doing this? We've been doing this through the SWOT analysis, looking at each region, identifying these challenges and gaps that we all had, and also through a peer review document that we generated, looking at the role that private and public stakeholders had in each region to adapt to these RIS3 strategies. The second objective on the project, it is to generate these interactions between among all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. How? Through workshops, through study visits, to seminars, conferences, to well, events like this one that we've been organizing since 2017 to share the knowledge between different partners and also different stakeholders. Very, very concrete and with very with a lot of success, I must say, within the whole project. And the third operational objective, it is in the end to generate things, to generate concrete measures. So with all this information, we started working with the action plan, each partner with its action plan. And now it is time to implement those action plans into something concrete. And this is what it's going to stay at the end of the project. Next one. So just a brief overview of how we divided the project. It is divided in 2 phases, 5 years in total, but 3 years the first phase that ended at the end of last year with all these activities that we organized during this time. And now we are in phase 2, which is about implementing the action plan and monitoring and evaluating the results. So we are able to as well share it with the rest of Europe. So this is a little bit what the project is about, and now through the session today we will look more specifically in each context and we will learn more about that. But please feel free to ask at the end of the event. Thank you very much.
So thanks very much, Yesenia. Appreciate that. So we're just going to move on now to Roselanne's intervention. So Roselanne, maybe you can just open your camera and unmute yourself, and we will be able to hear your presentation. Is Roselanne still with us? we were having difficulties with Ruslan. I know he was experiencing problems with his connection. So what I might do is just check to see if he's here with us, and if not, we might move forward to Karen's presentation, and then we can. Oh, sorry, just a second now. I think I can. I think Ruslan is joining us right now. So just a second now, and I'm sure he'll be with us shortly. So Ruslan, can you hear us? Maybe you can unmute yourself and load up camera. Perfect. And what I'll do now is I will just share your slides again.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah.
I can hear you now. Perfect. Yes. So technical glitch has been overcome, and
okay.
And you're ready to go.
Just 1 second.
No problem. I'll just stop my video.
Okay,
and I'll mute myself.
It says my mic is on, but I cannot really hear any of you. Okay, just 1 second. John, okay, I think it's working now. Okay, sorry, apologies. I'm using an official government laptop, and these are not as flexible as private devices. Anyway, I'm delighted to be part of this discussion, and we had a similar maybe an opportunity to discuss smart specialization in the context of clusters a few years ago when I was invited by John to Cork. So today, John asked me to maybe give a slightly different perspective to try to explain what maybe happened and maybe some of the trends that we've been observing both in Europe and worldwide in relation to smart specialization. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you know, back in 2012, the European Commission has introduced, the European Union has introduced this ex-ante conditionality, which requires member states and mostly European regions to put in place a smart specialization strategy. So with its other hand, the European Commission put in place a support structure known as the Smart Specialization Platform. We're based in the south of Europe in Seville. And over the years, over the past 8 years, a significant number of regions, EU regions and member states have joined the platform in order to avail of the support tools and instruments prepared and developed by the Commission. As you can see, I have figures in the box there. About 178 regions have joined the Smart Specialization Platform. And 19 member states also joined at the national level. In addition, we have about 31 non-European regions as well as 7 member states. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the smart specialization ex-ante conditionality was put in place back in 2012, 2013 regulations. And to date, over 120 smart specialization strategies have been developed and are being implemented across the European Union. So here's a map indicating. And the total budgets that have been allocated through this exercise is over 40 billion euros. Next slide, please. Here's just a quick overview of some of the instruments and support tools that have been put in place by the European Commission, and it's through its smart specialization platform. You see there's a range of data, so S3 interactive web tools, which are basically data-driven tools that allow regions to see, maybe compare themselves, their performance with other parts of Europe. Also, we provide significant support through analytical work as well as publications, peer reviews, and so on. Next slide, please. This is one maybe trend that we see now. So over the past 8 years or so, there has been a slightly different approach to the level of smart specialization. So we see that in a lot of countries across the European Union, there is interest in developing not only national smart specialization strategies, but also at the regional level, which was the original idea. But now we see that there is also a new trend to develop urban development strategies that are also linked to smart specialization or to the S3 approach or methodology. Then we also observe that the European Green Deal has certain changes that are brought about, as well as there's a new focus, maybe more refined focus on the sustainable development goals. Next slide, please. So this is a slightly more specific European Green Deal focus slide. Here we're looking at some of the sub-priority areas that we see among the smart specialization priorities chosen or defined by the member states and EU regions. So these are often concerned with food and agriculture. So over a third of all member states and regions have priorities that are linked to this. Sustainable housing is becoming a significant focus area, just transition for certain parts of Europe, as well as clean energy. Next, please. This is again a way to maybe summarize. So over the past 8 years, with the introduction of smart specialization, we see that regions and member states realize that one of the maybe novelties of the approach is in building the interregional cooperation. So what we call the outward looking dimension, that is, it's not enough to be perfectly, developed or try to develop your economy without maybe taking into account as to what is being done elsewhere. So one of the things we're noticing is that there's a significant increase in interest in building interregional cooperation. And then on the right-hand side, we're listing some of the opportunities that regions recognize in such types of interregional cooperation. So these include accessing knowledge networks elsewhere, combining maybe or finding new markets, as well as joining global value chains. Next slide, please. This is just one of the publications that we, one of the two main publications, in fact, that we have. It's the so-called implementation guide for smart specialization that was published a few years ago. And one of the chapters is specifically on transnational cooperation and value chains, i.e. How smart specialization, how to take really advantage of smart specialization through cooperation with either your neighbors across the border or parts of Europe elsewhere. Next slide, please. A few years ago, back in 2016 or so, the European Commission realized that there is this interregional, so there's this interest in interregional cooperation, but we also noticed that regions started kind of clustering around certain topics. And what they wanted to do was maybe to work together in the area of agriculture or industrial modernization or energy. So back in 2016, the European Commission has put in place 3 so-called thematic smart specialization platforms. These are also managed by us here in Seville. And these allow regions to work at the project level on topics that should bring or help them build what we call an investment pipeline of bankable projects. Next slide, please. We developed a dedicated methodology that would help regions use these regional funds or nationally available funds in order to build European ecosystems for cooperation in these areas. And based on this methodology, we have over 30 interregional partnerships at this point. Many of them, by the way, use or are also members of various Interreg projects. Next slide, please. So this is probably the largest thematic platform to date. We call it S3P Industry, or a Smart Specialization Platform for Industrial Modernization. It's supported by a number of European Commission DGs, including DG RTD, DG GROW. So the focus is really on enterprise and kind of a business side of things. Next slide, please. So these are some of the examples. This platform has over 20, I think it's 22 or 23 interregional partnerships. And here are just some examples around So examples of topics around which these regions are working. It's several hundred regions that are actually involved in these exercises. Next slide, please. That's another quick example of an agri-food platform partnership. So an example is about traceability and big data, led, as you see, by two regions, Andalusia, as well as Emilia-Romagna in Italy. I think they have over 20 participating regions now. It's a slightly dated slide. And as you see, there are three specific kind of practical, maybe working groups they've put together. So one of them, for example, is the smart monitoring of the value chain, agricultural production, so on and so on, across the agri-food sector. So it kind of brings together on one topic that is shared by these 20 regions, brings them all together, but they then work in special or dedicated work groups in order to have very practical involvement. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, so smart specialization is certainly, it has a very specific context, as we say, within the European Union, because it is what we call an ex-ante conditionality. However, over the last 6 years, we've also noticed the increase in interest across the world in smart specialization as a methodology, also as an experiment, as a policy-making experiment. Despite many parts of Europe, parts of the world have very different what we call administrative contexts. So there are no regional funds available, for example, for such activities. The map I have in front of you is a kind of a summary of the type of involvement or interest that we've, if you could go back to. So the areas in green are countries that have explicitly expressed interest in smart specialization. Blue, of course, is the European Union, currently with the UK still on that map. And then countries in orange are those that already cooperate with us, with the European Union on smart specialization. Next slide, please. This is one example. So back in August, I've been asked, or we have been asked to deliver training at training seminar, a series of training seminars really for what they call city innovation officers in Thailand. So the National Innovation Agency of Thailand have asked us to prepare a module on innovative regions and smart specialization. Next slide. And then again, I try to summarize or put lists of countries that we're working with one way or another. I'm personally now involved in the first two columns. So I work with the Western Balkan countries, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, and so on and so on. And then as you see, the central part, EU neighborhood, these are the countries that are in the immediate neighborhood to the European Union. And these have already started working on the development of smart specialization strategies. So in particular, I'm working currently on the development of a series of training seminars for Georgia on smart specialization that are starting next week. And then as you see the third column, the interest that we've identified or we've been approached by authorities from a very broad range of countries, geographically speaking, from Australia to Brazil, Canada, Colombia. So a lot of Central and South America are already involved and have developed smart specialization strategies. And then we see South Africa is already involved and so on. Next slide, please. So to help these countries and economies to approach the very topic of smart specialization, as I mentioned earlier, the context is different. So it's not easy for them to apply the methodology we would usually propose in the context of European Union countries and regions. So we had to develop a dedicated, what we call RIS3 framework for EU enlargement and neighborhood region in order to help them go through these exercises. Here's an overview prepared by my colleagues in the context of Western Balkans. As you see, a number of Western Balkan economies, Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Turkey, are currently at this stage where they're developing institutional capacity. Then other economies like North Macedonia and Albania are going through the mapping exercise, where they map basically the available capabilities in their economies. And then the other two economies at the top, Montenegro and Serbia, have already developed smart specialization strategies successfully. Next slide, please. This is just, as we all like figures, we've put together maybe a summary of what has been achieved globally so far. So as I mentioned, there are two formally adopted smart specialization strategies. In 5 non-EU countries, national smart specialization teams have been formally put together. A total 7 countries have formally expressed interest and asked the European Union for support in the development of smart specialization. We've already trained over 80 representatives of the public administration, and then 450 representatives of the private sector were involved in the definition and understanding of the priority areas, as well as over 1,600 of stakeholders have been reached to date. Next slide, please. That's another example where my colleagues are trying to find a way, perhaps, to explore the extent to which the approach could be developed also applied in Africa in the context, of course, with a connection with the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's a pilot running with Rwanda, where they're also trying to develop what they call smart specialization for STI, so science, technology, and innovation roadmaps to SDGs, and it's a very specific pilot. Next slide, please. Well, this is a summary from my side. So should you have any questions, I'll be here to answer this. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks, John.
Thank you very, very much, Ruslan. So just as we move between Ruslan's presentation and Karen, who's going to give some perspectives on Ireland, I would ask you, the attendees, to use our Q&A function to ask your questions, and we'll come back to them then after Karen's presentation. So Karen, hopefully you can pop on your video and unmute yourself, and I will move on to the start of your presentation.
Hi, I can't see my camera coming up there, but I have turned it on, John.
Yeah, I can see you now. Perfect, Karen.
Great. Okay, apologies. Thanks. Okay, well, thanks everybody for having me here today. Looks like to be a very interesting project. So it's great to be able to come and hear about it and supposed to be a part of it. If you wouldn't mind just moving to the next slide, John. Thank you. Okay, so I work as a project officer with the Southern Regional Assembly, and just to give you, I suppose, a very quick overview of what we as an assembly do, we'd be managing authority for the regional operational programs here in the Southern region. We monitor EU funding, we'd secure investment and make funding applications. We would house some of the ETC contact points. For example, we would have the Interreg Europe contact point, the Northwest Europe contact point. We would house the FLC unit, the first level control. We'd coordinate, promote and support strategic planning and sustainable development of the region. Promote effectiveness in local government and public services. And since January 2015, we've been given an additional function of regional planning. And as part of that, we were tasked with drafting a regional, spatial and economic strategy, which I will go into a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes. Next slide, John. So the Regional Assembly is made up of 34 members or councillors from across the 10 local authorities across the region, and they would meet, they're the kind of the board of members, they'd meet on a monthly basis, normally in our headquarters, but at the moment, like everybody else, virtually online, and to discuss or to pass any decisions that need to be made on business within the Assembly. So next slide, please. Just to kind of give you an overview then, I suppose, on the structure here in Ireland. So we have 3 regional assemblies based in the NUTS 2 regions. And you can see there we will be the southern region based at the bottom half of the country. Our regional operational programs predate our current NUTS classification. So we actually have 2 operational programs in play at the moment. And we would look after, as the southern region, we would look after the southern and eastern operational program. So we're hoping it's under discussion for the next programming period as to how that will be approached. Will we mirror the NUTS 2 regions, or will we go with the current 2 operational program areas? So yet to be decided, but at the moment we have 2. Next slide, please. So I had mentioned that the Southern Region Assembly is responsible for just to give you a little bit of context around that. So it's essentially a 12-year plan for the region. So it sets out the vision for the strategic planning and economic development up until 2031. And at that point, then it'll be reviewed and another iteration will be drafted. It came into effect on the 31st of January 2020. It was a long time in the making. It's the first of its kind, but it did come into effect on the 31st of January of this year. So the main purpose of the RIS is to support the implementation of the national planning framework. So it's the regional articulation of that national policy. And going forward now, it's going to set the framework for local planning and economic development. So I suppose the key reason for the ethos for the RIS is that it'll be the driver of balanced regional development, with the key objective to strengthen the regional cities through their development as metropolitan areas. And I know Ruslan had alluded to that some cities now are looking at building smart specialisation strategies. Now, while this isn't an S3, it does focus on the strengths of that city and I suppose how to make it an economic engine for the region, and also to try and counterbalance the oversaturation of Dublin, which is our capital city at the moment. So next slide, please. Just give you an idea of the governance structure there. So you have the national planning framework, which would be the national strategy, and then it filters down to the 3 regions, and you've got your regional, spatial and economic strategy, and that then feeds down or filters down to the local government. So you then have the city and county development plans, the local economic and community plans, the local area plans, and they all now have to align themselves to the RIS, which in turn has aligned itself to the national planning framework. So next slide, please. So the RIS itself, it's a very ambitious strategy. Some would say it's a disruptive strategy, but it has 3 kind of core objectives at its base. So for the Southern region, we now want to become the most creative and innovative region, the most green region, and the most livable region. And along with those, every objective within, or every point in the RIS has aligned itself to the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so smart specialisation, I know everybody's familiar with that term, so it's just to remind ourselves what exactly that is. So smart specialisation is essentially, it's an innovation policy concept, and it's there to boost regional innovation, to contribute to growth and prosperity by helping and enabling regions to focus on their strengths. So what are they doing well, and try and build on that. It's a bottom-up approach, and it's based on that quadruple helix model. So involving local authorities, your academia, your enterprise, and your civil society. And it's going to require us to make smart strategic choices and evidence-based policy making. And this is where we hope the RIS will be able to assist in this going forward for the Southern region and for the country in general. Next slide, please. Okay, so smart specialisation in Ireland. Next slide, John. So as Ruslan had said already, so S3 became a condition of the RDF funding for the current programming period. So in 2014, Ireland would have conducted a national research prioritisation exercise. And from that, 14 priority research areas were identified, and they have now made up what we would consider our smart specialisation strategy. And you can see the 14 areas there. Next slide, please. And around 2015, there was a further refinement of those into 6 overarching sectors, but they have essentially made up our S3 since 2014. It's a very static strategy. There's been no refinement or no evolution or review of that since 2014. Next slide, please. So just give you a little bit of, I suppose, context around that. So my involvement in S3, I would work as a project officer on another Interreg Europe project called Cohesion. And I suppose our main objectives of that are trying to integrate the territorial dimension into our S3, as we only have a national S3 in Ireland. So trying to get that kind of that regional or territorial element or voice in there. And what we want to try and do is increase the impact of our S3, improve links between our operational programme and the RD&I environment, and within our public and private sectors, and promote a multi-level governance model in doing so. So you can see there's about integrating the territorial dimension, Smart priorities are all about identifying your complementarities and synergies between the different levels, and that's in terms of your priority or niche opportunities. And that's all to try and get that kind of more, that further specialisation of specific regions or territories. And then governance, which is a key element of S3. So it's that coordination of innovation support players, promoting the mobilisation of stakeholders and delivering innovation support all along the region for that regional and interregional innovation. Next slide, please. So I suppose just to let you know that there's 10 partners on it, and much like yourselves, it mirrors that make up, so there's different regions from across Europe involved in the project. Next slide. So I suppose when we looked at it, our objectives again were to integrate that territorial dimension for the cohesive S3 and promote a multi-level governance model. But I mean, what does this actually mean for us as a region, as a country? Next slide, please. So when we refer to multi-level governance, it's trying to move from that hierarchical governance to that more kind of network-like structures. And this is, I suppose, a movement across Europe as well to try and kind of get that more kind of collaborative effort going. So it's a collective decision-making process where authority and influence are shared between stakeholders, and they can be operating at multiple levels of governance and within different policy sectors. So to get that mix in there. Next slide, please. Okay, so why are we as a regional assembly a partner in a project such as Cohesion? So our national S3 at the moment has no real noted recognition of the regional specificities and no separate smart specialisation strategies at the 3 NUTS2 regions. However, it's very clear that each region in its own right has individual strengths and competitive advantage, where those priority areas are of more importance to the economy in that region. And I'd mentioned the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy, the RIS3, and the concept of smart specialisation cuts across that entire process. And it very much recognises and endorses the smart specialisation and clustering, I suppose, strategies as the path to smart cities, and to, I suppose, to build us up as a competitive, innovative and productive regional economy. The RIS3 itself sets out a very ambitious framework for the region. However, it does provide a very timely opportunity now that we're at the beginning of the next programming period. We'll probably have to review our S3, and I suppose it gives us a good opportunity now to consider and align our S3 strategy in Ireland at that regional level. And it may be that we use the forum of the RIS3 to do that, or we look at other alternatives, but it's there as an opportunity, timing wise. Next slide, please. So what do we want to achieve from our, I suppose, our involvement in this project? So we want to focus the region on recognising and building on its smart priorities. We want a better coordination between innovation support services at regional and local level, a further refining of those smart priorities at the regional level. That would include city and county level, and then align them all back to the national S3, enhanced placemaking for enterprise development. We believe the RIS3 now could be a forum to raise awareness around the benefits of targeted regional S3 that can align with the national priorities, and then improved management and monitoring mechanisms at that regional level. So next slide, please. So when you look at the S3 process, I mean, your first step is to get your regional analysis, then you choose, or I suppose, look at what your areas of specialisation are going to be, then you plan around those and build on those, and then you put in your monitoring and your governance. So one of the outputs of the Cohesion project was a smart territorial map that would have, I suppose, performed a diagnostic analysis of the region, and it would have highlighted our specialisations both at a sectoral and horizontal level. It would have highlighted the current innovation agencies and the relevant policies in place, and it would have looked at the governance in place, and it would have looked, I suppose, at what we're doing right and what gaps we have, what do we need to do to be able to, I suppose, to perform effectively. Next slide, please. So then you have the SDM conclusions. So looking at it, a lot of the specialisations that were recognised then. So the National S3 was essentially a research prioritisation exercise, as I said. With the mapping exercise, we identified regional strengths that fell outside the scope of the priorities of the S3. It was noted that there were limited attention to trends of performance at the regional level, no recognition of emerging strengths such as cybersecurity, which I know CIT is working on. Research innovation is well represented. However, it was recognised that SMEs felt that they were largely ignored within the S3, a lack of support there. And it's kind of been noted that most SME community operate in low to medium technology sectors, and there's a lack of support there for the kind of management and digital skills that they would need to be able to move up a level. The national S3 priorities weren't market driven, And while there are clearly defined priorities at each of the local authority levels in the region, they were developed in isolation with no kind of regional coordination or influence essentially up until now. So with the RIS now, hopefully that will address that. Next slide, please. So when we looked at the governance in place, Ireland would be characterised by what's considered to be a complex research innovation governance structure. We work from a very traditional kind of hierarchical top-down approach to policy making in Ireland, which can sometimes render it space blind, so it doesn't recognise those kind of regional strengths. Not necessarily coordination between the governance spaces at local authority level. There's no dedicated cluster policy. However, there is a growing acknowledgement that it is going to be integral to having successful smart priorities or a smart specialisation strategy. And there's variable geography within the region, again, that needs to be addressed to be able to build on our strengths effectively. Next slide. And again, and this will be very important, there was no kind of awareness or highlight of the vulnerabilities that we would be open to, or building in a strategy to safeguard against those. For example, one of our stakeholders that would have taken part in the process would have highlighted the southern region in particular as being very vulnerable to automation. So I mean, how do we address that we could be able to build on that within our RIS3? The current centralised governance structure, it's said now maybe no longer fit for purpose. There's a need for an improved and stronger regional governance, and that seems to be the movement across Europe as well. No defined governance or oversight at the regional level for RIS3. Not necessarily a formal collaboration between the relevant bodies. So we maybe look at that multi-level governance model that I had outlined at the start, maybe use that governance model that the RIS has to address this. And then there was insufficient metrics in place to be able to monitor and evaluate to see what is working and what isn't. Next slide, please. So going forward, what do we need to do? So obviously we're coming into a new programming period. More than likely we will have a new S3 to be able to, you know, as our conditionality for getting the operational program funding. So there's 3 key areas that have been identified that we need to address. So we need to look at the governance, we need to look at that kind of bottom-up process, the entrepreneurial discovery process, and we need to look at effective monitoring and evaluation. So for us as a region, we want to be able to develop clear place-based smart priorities, which are not just research priorities. Remove those spatial blinkers, look at that place-based approach that the RIS has been able to provide. So it's been kind of said that the process that underpinned the development of the RIS has now created a fresh momentum or appetite across the stakeholders for that stronger place-based dimension to our S3. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, just go back one. Yeah, so it was deemed that the RIS performed a very crucial bottom-up stock-taking exercise. There was a very extensive consultation process and was a bottom-up approach. So hopefully that would help, and it could form the foundations for a refresh of Ireland's S3 and that regional approach. We want to try and build a more regional collaborative approach via the 3 RISs. Tackle that lack of monitoring and evaluation, so try and develop and report on regional KPIs. It's very clear what gets measured gets done. Support that more strategic approach to clustering, and build in an ongoing revision of those regional smart priorities into the governance. So you know, keep in line with trends and market trends with those. And that's a very quick snapshot of where we are in the southern region at the moment. So obviously any questions I'd be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
That's great, Karen. Thanks a million. I'm just going to move forward your slides now because we're into the Q&A section. So I'm just going to consult our questions and answers element, which is which we're still waiting for people to start asking their questions there. So if you do have questions, please pop them into the Q&A and we can ask them there. But I have a couple. Karen, as you're still there and you have your video on, maybe we could ask Ruslan just to turn his on as well at the moment. But in terms of RIS3 and how that's working sort of currently, you've mentioned a number of different items there about how Ireland can progress, but if you had to pick 2 things, what do you think could really be transformative for RIS3 in Ireland? What would be the 2 things if you could take over? What would be the 2 things you'd implement?
I think the important things are to reflect that regional voice. So we need to know what we're good at in the region and build on that. But the key thing is the governance, it's the monitoring and evaluation. So there's no point in having anything in place unless you know what's working. I mean, you know, you can have the best strategy in the world, but if nobody's checking it to make sure, or, you know, I suppose putting in that governance and that monitoring, what's the point? You don't know what has worked and what hasn't. So kind of it needs to be an ongoing learning process all the time.
Okay, it's probably it's something that we've come across as well, I suppose, with RIS3 in Ireland, that you know, that sort of evaluation piece, or how it's evolved, hasn't really happened since. I mean, some of your slides went back to 2014 and the 14 priority areas that were identified in Ireland. So
I think it was treated as an exercise to get the ERDF funding. Whereas I think if we treated it as an actual strategy that we need to work towards or align ourselves to, I think that would make it more effective. So I think hopefully in the new round of funding, the S3 would be seen as a strategy to work towards, because there wouldn't be a huge amount of awareness around, well, certainly in the southern region, or, you know, across the country in terms of that strategy. So I think maybe again that kind of raising awareness of it,
okay,
is really quite important as well.
Perfect. So I have a question here for Roslan, and then we have another question that's come in on our Q&A. So Roslan, just from your experience, so and building in the back of what Karen has said about monitoring, who across Europe is really sort of progressing with RIS3? So who are the real sort of leaders in terms of countries or regions that you've seen? And are there areas as well, I suppose, that are really falling behind, or, you know, that haven't really pushed their RIS3 forward?
Well, so it's hard to, you know, choose one single region or country, say that they are the leaders when it comes to smart specialization. We've seen good practices and examples of how things could be done across, well, everywhere from Western Europe to Southern or Eastern parts of Europe. I think what we notice is that some countries are traditionally better when it comes to what we call stakeholder engagement. So Scandinavian or Northern countries tend to have these processes applied across their policy making, where in maybe newer member states, the open and transparent policy, transparent stakeholder engagement process is not as natural maybe or organic, so they learn how to do these things. We see that also in the Western Balkans or in Ukraine, for example, where applying very new, these transparent and open dialogue approach to consulting with the general public. These are sometimes new and are not very easy to implement. We also see certain challenges now because of the COVID-19 pandemic, where generally in normal times, we organize a huge number in each country. We would organize a significant number of workshops. We would invite the general public, people from universities, businesses, so on and so on, to attend these and to be involved in discussions of certain priority areas, because this would have significant impact on the processes later on. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, we're unable to carry these in-person meetings. So we have to develop new processes of how to carry out this entrepreneurial discovery process. Is basically a way to validate your priorities and to find those who would pioneer these in certain sub areas or subdomains. So we have to find a way to do that online, and this we have some good examples. For example, in one of the Portuguese regions of Alentejo, they've developed an online-based EDP, so this entrepreneurial discovery process. Also, one of the issues that we see, and this is probably true for most, just for the policymaking context, is that while back in 2012, when we developed the very methodology behind smart specialization, one of the points was put in place as early as possible a valid, stable monitoring and evaluation framework so that you can evaluate and assess your progress later on. So we see that that did not necessarily happen everywhere to the same extent. So in Ireland, for example, as Karen mentioned, the original strategy that gave kind of or was translated into smart specialization was the National Research Prioritization Exercise that did have a dedicated publication on, or at least so many pages on how these would be evaluated and monitored. But this maybe was not necessarily translated or updated as time went on. So there are certain challenges. And maybe the last challenge is also related to governance. So what we generally say in a good smart specialization strategy, governance is basically as important as the stakeholder engagement and transparency, because in most member states, you have these layers of even policymakers. So you have regional, national level, as again, Karen pointed out. In Ireland, this would be the national smart specialization. And then yet there are these kind of regional, NUTS2 level spatial strategies. So bringing together these very different levels of policymakers is not necessarily easy, and has to be, we have to find a way to do it and make it more natural for us to bring these people together and to allow them to kind of listen to each other. Well, this is kind of a summary from my side.
Thanks very much, Ruslan. There's been a couple of questions come in. We had one from Alan Whiteside in Scotland, who's mentioning about that he's involved in developing S3 clusters based around health and the environment in Scotland. And I actually think you've touched on the answer to his question. So he was looking about discussing the measured benefits of regions that have implemented RIS3 compared to those that still apply key sector models like the UK. So I think you've actually mentioned some of that there in your discussion. And another question that's come in is maybe for Karen. Just it's from an anonymous attendee, so maybe keeping this one up their sleeve, or maybe it's someone working in one of the regional assemblies like yourself. But in a small country like Ireland, how do you propose to ask different regions to make choices on S3? Will there not be very similar specializations across the different regions in Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, this argument comes up time and time again, but I mean, if you look at other models across Europe, you've got small countries like ourselves, but they have been able to operate strategies like this at a regional level. For example, I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and I know they were talking, say, about Portugal and the Algarve in particular, and they're S3. So I mean, that wouldn't be a huge region per se. And you'd automatically think tourism for them would be their main, I suppose, economic driver. But they also, funnily enough, would have a huge goat farming industry there. So they were trying to look at ways to pivot that and to, I suppose, capitalize on what's there. And they ended up going into the skincare industry and, being innovative like that. So I think, this argument of Ireland being small and it's not big enough to be able to focus on the regions, you have to look at those complementarities as well. So look at what you're good at as, within your own region, and then how do you, I suppose, collaborate then with the other regions. So that, there's a two-pronged approach there. So, I don't know if that argument necessarily, is there anymore.
Yeah. That's fair enough.
Sorry, that answers the question.
Just to answer one more quickly, because I think we'll have to get into our action plan updates. But Ruslan, maybe just from your experience in working with a couple of different countries across Europe and further afield, are there any perceived benefits within and between regions with RIS3 clusters in response to COVID and in terms of accelerating activities or accelerating I suppose the response to that? So essentially, I suppose boiling down that cluster or boiling down that question, do clusters play more of an impact in delivering RIS3 strategies, I guess?
It's an interesting question. It's hard to say hard to quantify maybe the impact of having or not having clusters in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, because we just did not have enough time to make these conclusions. But in general, I have spent maybe 4 years working with these interregional partnerships, so under the 3 thematic platforms that I mentioned. And what we've noticed is that in regions, or let's put it partnerships, interregional partnerships, where there are clusters, and these clusters are active enough to take a leading role in the region to engage in such partnerships. Well, these interregional partnerships have much better focus and are able to maybe move quickly through the organizational aspects, like setting up their governance and so on, and go into maybe very specific kind of hands-on areas of deciding on pilot areas and bringing in maybe businesses into the process. So we've seen that certainly maybe at least 50% faster. So the partnerships that have clusters at the heart of the activities, and not only have clusters in these regions, but also let these cluster organizations to represent the region in these interregional activities. We've noticed that such interregional partnerships are a lot faster and are kind of better at finding their feet on the ground and finding, these focus areas. So we have seen the benefits.
Very good, very good. Listen, I'm going to have to leave it there for this particular round of questions. So thanks very much to Ruslan and to Karen for their interventions. We really, really appreciate it. I'm sure there may be more questions at the end. The questions are coming in thick and fast now, but we'll move to the next segment that we have, which is the regional action plans. And I'll just check if Xavier is with us to present the...
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm here. I'm pleased to be here. Hi John, thank you for organizing the webinar. We would have liked to be there in Cork with you, but unfortunately we can't be. I hope that next year we will be able to meet in presence, and thank you for previous presenters. I'm going to be brief since we have like 4 or 5 minutes to present each action plan. So a few words about what was the aim in the ecoRIS3 project regarding our action plan. We wanted to, in the second slide I will explain that, but we wanted to address our promotion plan, our economic development plan that we launch every year, and we wanted to get better at it in an overall way, just having learned from different best practices that were presented during our meetings all over the project, in Lithuania, in Portugal, in Latvia, and in Turin. We really appreciated what we learned, and we thought that we could implement some different actions with the different stakeholders that we work with all over the year through our economic development plan that I was mentioning before. So if you please go to the next slide, John. I will briefly explain the 3 main actions that we had included in this action plan. The first one was to try to create technology-based innovative companies in cooperation with research and technology centers, a work that we already developed and have been developing the last few years. But we wanted to specifically work on tailor-made training programs for PhD students to try to make this jump from the research centers to create startups and their own business, just fostering also entrepreneurships in those technology centers, increasing also the number of technology centers that are offering our technology vouchers, which is a really interesting program that has led to many good results, and in fact it has been one of the best practices that led to the pilot action that we're developing with Turin. Also increasing the budget to offer those technological vouchers. As I will explain before, this wasn't possible due to the current situation, unfortunate situations, and also developing mentoring services from already experienced business managers to spin-offs. The second action, if you can go to the next slide, John, was trying to spark entrepreneurship among our young students. Many of you in your regions, we detected that we have a lack of entrepreneur mindsets in our researchers, and that leads to a lack of new business and new products developed in our city, which is a shame because we have really good researchers and really good research projects. So that's why we wanted to implement programs to foster this entrepreneurial mindset and promote tailor-made training programs for those PhD and researchers that are really good in basic research, but really don't have that mindset and that knowledge to make the jump and create new entrepreneurs and companies. And another point was to make them work also with people from the business side, so they can make mixed teams, so they can create new jobs, new companies. Sorry. With these multidisciplinary teams, so they can just launch new companies, and we were trying to develop it through our 18 Plus program. And if you can go through to the next slide, John, please, to the action 3, we wanted as an overall approach to increase the cooperation with our innovation ecosystem. And this is like a resume of the actions 1 and 2. And as you can see, what we wanted, our aim was to try to get more agents and stakeholders from our city. We already work with most of them, but there are always more startups and more centers that we are currently not working with. So if you can go, John, to the next slide, we're going to share with you some of the results that we have right now. With all this unfortunate COVID-19 situation, instead of launching our traditional European Economic Development Program that I was mentioning, the Donostia program, in March, we had to launch an economic recovery program, and which was called the PREC #1, and which was basically a program with a lot of different aids and financial funds just to survive for our companies and different stakeholders. But we are slowly recovering and getting back to our DNA and just talking more about innovation, RIS3, and we have been able to launch a few days ago our second program of the year, and now we are just getting back to what we normally do, fostering innovative programs and calls and subsidies. As you can see, as Talent Innovador, Investigative Researchers, we have launched our technological vouchers, business transformation programs, the 18 Plus for entrepreneurship, our business incubator, and it has been a really success. Everything is already compromised. We are now studying all the demands that we have from the technological centers, from the companies, from the business, from different entrepreneurs. And as you can see, everything has been a really success, and we are really happy, since we see that everyone is demanding more innovation and letting behind us the crisis situation. So this is in a few words what we have been able to accomplish and how we are getting back to our normal DNA, talking about innovation, fostering our innovative ecosystem.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Xavier. And again, we'll have all the questions at the end for all of the action plans. So if you do have questions, please jot them down and we can go through those at the end. So just to give some perspectives from Ireland, as it's our turn to present the action plan, I suppose from learning through the ecoRIS project, we're particularly impressed, I suppose, by the Innovation Poles cluster program in the Piedmont region in Italy, the gaming cluster in Finland, the LICTEC cluster in Lithuania, and the Squala 6 co-working space in Latvia. So they formed the inspiration, I suppose, for our action plan. Our action plan had 3 actions. The first one, as we mentioned earlier, was probably around the area of cluster development in Ireland. So it's something that we see across Europe as being intrinsically linked with RIS3, and Ruslan mentioned how regions with clusters can really support, I suppose, what's happening and how entrepreneurial discovery happens and how companies are sort of connected. So we developed a methodology based on European best practice for cluster design in an Irish context, and we launched the Cyber Ireland cluster from here in CIT as part of the ecoRIS project. And I suppose the other actions looked at funding and the animation of that particular cluster. So we secured funding through the program for Cyber Ireland, And we have a methodology then that we're testing for the monitoring and evaluation of clusters as well, the VLink methodology. Our second action looked at the support for the development of a national cluster policy and training for cluster facilitation in Ireland. So, really speaking, I suppose, with national and regional stakeholders on how do we make this national cluster policy a reality. We've seen from other regions across Europe the importance of having that particular policy, having those rules of what fits the criteria of a cluster organization and cluster management around that. And we're looking to put that in place as part of the project. And then the third action was about bringing companies and academia together through opportunities in co-working spaces. So we have a series of actions around the co-working space to utilize that to bring academia and industry closer together and allow that sort of innovation transfer happen in that particular guise. So we're heavily involved, I suppose, in the regional enterprise strategy for the Southwest in terms of delivering that co-working action. So that's the short intervention from Ireland. I'm going to ask Vera now from Simdoave in Portugal to start her video and unmute herself, and we'll go through Vera's quick intervention.
Thank you, John. I'm Vera Soares from Portugal, so you can next slide, please, John. Our action plan focuses on improving the implementation of innovation support measures in our region by aiming to promote and support innovation and technology transfer and improve the visibility of innovation as a driver to foster local and regional innovation. To achieve these goals, we propose in our action plan some specific measures like the creation of an Innovation and Internationalization Council, improved governance, and increase the collaboration with the local innovation ecosystem in our region. Next slide, please. We have learned with the experience exchanging during the project activities, namely the importance of improving the local ecosystem from different points of view, from Fomento San Sebastián and the connection between academia and business from Cork. Next slide, please. So the first action proposed in our action plan is the creation of the Innovation and Internationalization Council in order to improve the governance of local innovation policies, bring local actors closer together to strengthen the innovation ecosystem, help to evidence the challenges and opportunities for innovation and promote the innovation and the internationalization of our companies, and communicate the needs and priorities for innovation and internationalization of our companies and our key stakeholders to the Regional Innovation Council of the North region. Next slide, John, please. So, the second action aims to promote the innovation, research and knowledge transfer force at our region. We want to implement a yearly event forum to raise awareness and increase visibility on innovation and research and knowledge transfer, addresses to the local and regional SMEs. And for this event, we want to involve the participation of the main stakeholders, like public institutions with responsibilities on innovation, technology and research centers, and academia with strong focus on the research and knowledge transfer will showcase practical examples of spin-offs and startups. And next slide, please, John. And the last action proposed is the implementation of a communication strategy in order to improve a culture, or to promote a culture of innovation at the regional level. This aims to involve the effective engagement and participation of the representatives of the local and regional actors to the innovation ecosystem in workshops, events, awards, meetings, adoption of a vision of policy priorities and implementation of key projects, and increasing the visibility to the best industrial projects related to implementation and use of nanotechnology in the north of Portugal. Next slide, please. Okay, so during this year, we carry out some meetings with our municipalities in order to collect some information and statistical data about their own projects. And we participated in the meetings of the Northern Regional Innovation Council for discuss and define the strategy of RIS3 for the next program period. So now we are organizing and articulating with the key stakeholders next steps to the creation of this Innovation and Internationalization Council, and prepare the signing the strategic partnerships. Thank you.
Thanks, Vera. Thanks very much. So we'll move quickly on ahead to Lorenas from Lithuania. So maybe Lorenas, you can pop on your video, and over to you. You can let
Do you see me now? Hi, everyone. Do you hear me well, John?
Perfect. Yeah, we hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So our action plan is actually based on increased cooperation in business and science. You can see the little screen on the right down corner. So on the next slide, I want you shortly to present that during ecoRIS project, we have made policy change. Our action plans is based on the operation program for investment in Europe in structurals and investments funds up to 2020. And during the project, we got inspiration from technology voucher, which was developed by Fomento de San Sebastian, one of the project partners. And innovation voucher scheme was what we had in operational program has been improved to InnoStarters LT scheme. So one of our action plan task is to monitor with this policy change and how the InnoStarter LT is this successful for now. So what I can say, from 2018, when this new scheme was launched, there was dedicated that this scheme will fund up to 100 company startups with the 2 million euro support. But today, for 2020, there are more than 156 applications with more than 5.6 million euros of support. So that's the great success from this project and operational program and this action plan. So on the next slide, this is the second part of our action plan. This is action 2. So we got inspiration from 3 project partners, good practices. There is a link for more information. So we structure in 3 parts. It's we looked for cooperative research, for education and skills development, and into new initiatives and co-creation networks, like was Vidzeme University of Applied Sciences with Smart Labs. On the next slide, you see in details that we mapping local ecosystem of our stakeholders, dividing them into 3 main groups: mature stakeholders, immature, other motivated stakeholders. So these 3 groups designated to different activities. So from 2 companies, we select pilot cases and then actualizing them into pilot projects for immature motivated stakeholders, these little SMEs, to engage local business companies into dialogue. And for other stakeholders, we run series of team up events. And then after all, we monitor all the pilot activities and disseminate the final results. And you can see, yes, on the next slide, you can see that there is our action plan activities is supported by operational program with different schemes. So for cooperative research, we have experimental T and industry digitalization. So far, Sunrise Valley is running digital innovation hub, where we have specialists for doing SMEs and audits, digitalization audit, and then after that audit, with these results, they can apply for industry digitalization support. As well, we giving startups ability and support to get for vouchers. These are feasibility studies, and in a Start LT project scheme where you can get support for your prototyping until TRL level 6, and if you want to go to into mass production, you can do TRL 9 with the same scheme support and get up to 50,000 euros. So to sum up, Sunrise Valley is running has run with cooperative companies team up events like Futurepreneurs. During the March, we have launched series of webinars with Lithuania Clitex cluster, which we are the organizers of that. We have run the Climate Launchpad, Hack for Vilnius with Vilnius City Municipality, one of our big stakeholders, and serious webinars on working on different entrepreneurial questions, how to start up, what's the, how can run my business now on the COVID-19 environment and so on. So thank you for your attention, and wish you good luck. And I think if slides will be shared, so you can have a links on my slides.
Good. Thank you very much, Lorenas. Okay, we're going to move now to Finland, and I think we have a treat because we have a number of different presenters in a short period of time. So Tomo, Ninetta, Juni, if you're there, maybe you could all share your videos, and I think Tomo is starting the presentation.
So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon around Europe. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting John. We share the responsibility of the presentation together with Ninetta Hanjotua and Jouni Ponnikas. They both are working for the Regional Council of Kainuu, and I'm working for the Regional Development Agency, Kainuun Etu. Next slide, please. Our presentation consists of good practice transfer and feasibility study, and in addition to the Kainuu action plan in reality. We transferred the concept of the cluster assessment and recommendation and applied it through the feasibility study. The V-Link methodology from Cork was presented to ecoRIS3 Kainuu stakeholders in the beginning of October 2019. In our opinion, it's demonstrated well the usefulness of an evidence-based cluster assessment and how to reach it. It led to further acceptance of the quantified approach towards cluster definition and assessment, with the possibility to apply eventually to the European Cluster Performance Platform. The feasibility study itself was very crucial. First of all, about the findings, we found very low business-to-business clustering potential in Kainuu when actual state of play is concerned. Secondly, significant research and education to business potential. And thirdly, the importance of integrating into larger contexts and investing also in related variety types of activities. And secondly, the ecosystem approach, one of the key objectives of ecoRIS. It strengthened the trans-regional ecosystem. And in slides 3, 4, 5 following, we will show these findings, how they are taken into account. Next slide, please. First of all, the focus of the action plan is integration of the ecoRIS3 action plan to into the Kainuu Regional Innovation Strategy. Integration, context and implications, structure of extractive industry sector and importance to the Kainuu economy was in focus. Kainuu Regional Mining Strategy, which was approved April 2019, it gave recommendations to set up a Kainuu mining cluster. And this ecoRIS3 feasibility study, which was implemented by Kainuun Etu, also the Educational Platform Plus was produced, and Kainuu restricted mining cluster was a challenge. But through integration of efforts involving more regions, we found that it could be feasible and suitable. Linkages to other initiatives: Mining S3 Partnership, Battery Alliance S3 Partnership, raw materials partnerships, including ELMO project. ELMO project is East and Northern Finland Industrial Transition Project. NEF region, meaning Northeastern Finland region. Industrial transition. And the revision of the Kainuu RIS3 is at the moment in process. It includes the research, draft meetings with stakeholders, and we estimate that in the end of this year it will be finalized. And then the Recovery and Resilience Facility plan in Kainuu includes sustainable development theme, networks and internationalization. They are all included. And time period approximately till the end of the last phase of this year to 2020. So ladies and gentlemen, now I give the floor to Jouni Ponnikas or Ninetta, how they have agreed. Thank you so much for my own part. Is Jouni on the line?
Jouni, are you with us? Or maybe Ninetta can take over if Jouni is.
Ninetta was there and is still.
So Jouni's having problems with his microphone. So maybe Ninetta, you could take over for a couple of minutes if that's okay. Or else if we're struggling with the technicalities, maybe what we can do is we can move to our next presentation, and if we can get it sorted at the end, we can come back. Okay.
That's totally okay. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Okay, so what I will do is I will ask Claudia to get ready, and I will change the slides, and we will move to the Italian action plan update from Piedmont.
Yes, thank you. Do you all hear me? Yeah.
Perfect. We hear you perfectly. Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. So some few words very quickly about our action plan. Next slide, please. So this is the frame of the policy tools in which our action plan is connected. Next slide. Here you can see the list of the workshops and meetings that have inspired the evolution and the development of our action plan. The next slide. The first action is the one single strategic direction for the local S3 entrepreneurship ecosystem. And this action is directly related to our strategic planning process and to its priorities that are linked to entrepreneurship and innovation. Next slide, please. So you can find here the list of good practices of ecoRIS3 project that inspired our first action. The next slide. The second action is aimed at identify a co-management model of a university space, improving the interlinkages among the quadruple helix component, as you can see. Next slide. And here you can find the list of the good practices that inspired our action, our second action. The next slide, please. And this is our third action, that is the coordination of initiatives in support of the creation and scale up of micro enterprises and startup in the e-health sector. And we presented a specific pilot action on this topic. Next slide. Thank you. The content and context and inspiration is this one, as you can see, and the title of our pilot action is eHealth Territorial Lab, Local Ecosystem as an Instrument to Scale Up Innovative Local Startup in eHealth. Topic. The next slide, please. Thank you. So the main points of the pilot are related to the activation of territorial labs in order to identify and test innovative e-health services and products. We cooperate on this pilot action with Fomento San Sebastian and their stakeholder, Biodonostia. And this is the activity that is more developed at this point, and we identify a really small portion of our territory to test and implement this pilot action that is a rural and mountain area bordering the south of France, and we are now running on with the territorial dialogue, and this is really an exercise to bring one of the S3 priority to the really territorial level. So the next one, please. So I hope that colleagues are solving the technical problems. I try to be very quick to present just an overview, a flavor of our action plan, but I'm available for your question via also after this meeting via email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. So we're going to move forward again to the last of our action plans. So we have Alonia from Vidzeme in Latvia. So Alonia, maybe you can share your video and I will pass it over to you.
Hello, my name is Ilona and I represent Vidzeme planning region from Latvia. Can you go to the next slide? Compared to the other partners, we actually realized that a lot of instruments are already in place or are being developed by other projects. For example, some coordination council on innovation we actually developed through another Interreg project. But in ecoRIS project, we mainly focused on missing skills because we realized that our region, which has a lot of active companies, is very often the last active in taking the government support. So we were looking at the issues which prevent our companies actually to move forward and use support already available in various instruments. And our objective is actually to raise the number of companies which are using state support in developing the innovations. So our first action is innovation project manager. Missing skills in the region require to have more knowledge on how to address the available instrument and also how to move forward with the project when you have assistance available. We also wanted to stimulate cooperation between companies and science because a lot of them right now innovate in-house, and that's not always the most efficient way to get really good quality of the new products. Next slide. So we actually have been successfully granted a pilot action on innovation project manager. So the innovation project managers, 5 companies from our region will be granted support. We just last week selected the companies which are being supported, and for 9 months they will get a very qualified innovation manager who will help them with information, help plan the activities so that within 9 months the project is moving faster. And I hope that by the end of this pilot action, we will be having a new approach on how to involve companies in creating new products. And we can suggest our implementing agency to have another support mechanism for regional companies. Actually, we have seen that as a very good working mechanism also in the other countries, and we are learning, for example, from Italian experience as well. They have mentors for startups, which help companies develop. So we are learning a lot from these best practices of other regions. Next slide. Another action which we found very interesting, and we thought that it also can help to move forward on our objective to have more collaboration projects with science, is to develop a co-creation lab, which we copied or used an inspiration from Helsinki University example, which was developed.
Very flash past.
And we actually
you see in the email.
Sorry, I don't see the email right now. I'm presenting right now.
Yeah, okay.
But we are now running a co-creation lab where we have 8 scientists and 7 companies. And of course, we have challenge of the COVID. We had planned to do that in spring. We postponed it to a meeting now in November. And we realized that actually it's not feasible to meet in person. So we have tested online co-creation lab between scientists and companies with Zoom, group work, collaboration, trying to make them work. And it has been quite challenging, but actually we figured out that it's still doable. We have established some new relationships. We will have the next session next week. So we will have pretty interesting experience. And afterwards, we will have a strategy on how to apply this experience in our region, because we are really in need for taking more skills from other regions, from other research institutions towards raising the quality of the product or innovation in our region. Next slide. And so we hope that within this activity, which we're now implementing, we will have at least 2 more companies in Vidzeme carrying out research and development activities with the scientists. Our experiment right now is focusing on packaging in sustainable packaging in food sector, as actually bioeconomy is 80% of all projects submitted from our region. We realize that this is the strongest sector in our region, so we try to help it with the sustainable packaging. And we also know that this is a competitive issue everywhere. Next slide. And that is actually this from our side. We have been really practical, focusing on things which can help our companies to grow. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Adonia. So we have 2 options now. We can go back very, very quickly to the Finnish action plan. If Ninetta, you've been able to solve the difficulties.
Hello, John. My mic is now working. So.
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, I'll move the slides backwards for you, and then we just ask that you be very, very quick so that we can move to the questions.
Yes, I'm the biggest man in the West. Here are our RIS3 strategy in one slide, which is challenging, but it's there. And this is the RIS3 which is under the revision now. And we have separated different teams in this RIS3, and that team 1 is increasing research and promoting innovations, and it concentrates on our focuses on research, and these are the focuses, expertise we have in applied research, and there are named there, especially this measurement technology and big data analytics and high performance computing are very interesting. And these, when we do this applied research on these specialities, of course they produce results, and these results are implemented forward in this team 2, where is the strengthening and diversifying the specialization space. And this team 2 is divided into 2 separate branch, and one is this industries, and we forward develop the research results on industry sector, and then another is services. And these services are where we produce the results of research forward, but these are also drivers for the development and for the results. So this works on to the both directions. And then we have team 3, which helps and better the regional innovation system, makes it better working. And these are the tools that we use to further develop our innovation system in the region. And then we have cross-cutting teams in a RIS3 strategy, and one team of cross-cutting teams is digital transformation, and these issues are cross-cutting issues that are taken into consideration in all activities taking under the RIS3 strategy. And then the second cross-cutting team is the Green Deal, and it's also taking as a cross-cutting team on all activities when it's possible. And this of course comes from the EU policy, as we all know. And then we have we have different instruments which helps us to implement clever way this RIS3 strategy. And there is of course one crucial instrument is this entrepreneurial discovery process. So this is what we have done with our RIS3 strategy, and it's now under the revision. And if you move to the next slides, there you can see that it's not sorry this is the different slide, but anyway this shows that we have made in this ecoRIS3 project, we have made a feasibility study on mining cluster, how we will cluster mining sector in our region. And these points in these slides are the dimensions that will be included when we develop the mining cluster. And this clustering issue is also part of the RIS3 strategy implementation. And there will be educational platform and cooperation. There will be innovation hub developed following the Joint Research Center concept. And there will be battery alliance membership for our region and cooperation on battery cluster, which is a very crucial issue now in mining sector. And then if we go forward to the next slide, we can see these administrational tasks of this revised RIS3 strategy for the last steps for that in order to be accepted in regional board, and then also ministry will give an acceptance to that, and then finally we will have goals for funding somewhere in next year. These are the issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uni. I appreciate that and the speed that you went through the last couple. What I'm going to suggest now is that rather than having our questions now, we have one more presentation. So we might just connect with Tamara and then we can go back to questions for all, because we're going to run over, I would imagine, by about 10 minutes, but we can answer any of the questions you have after Tamara's presentation. So Tamara,
okay.
if you're there and you can pop on your video. Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. Do you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. First of all, I would like to present myself. My name is Tamara Spiniera. I'm the responsible for the Secretariat of the Atlantic Cities Network, which is a network composed of 20 local authorities from the north of France to the Canary Islands, created in 2000s. And here in ecoRIS3, we were doing a supporting role, trying to link the activities of the project with the European Union and policies of the European Union with the activities of the project. For example, doing a presentation of the project in July 2019 in the Committee of the Regions. Also, I would like to clarify about the goals of this presentation, that I'm not going to say, go to this fund or put these magic words in your application form so you will be funded, or do this project in concrete, I'm sure you will get the money. No, I want just to clarify the steps before the even deciding which call to go, or even writing the operational program in the case we are here, or even before looking for partners. And it's like when I was younger, we were 18 and we had to decide on a career. We didn't enlist on the first faculty that had room. We tried to figure out what we wanted to do of our lives. That's the same point of view that it must be taken during the conception of a project. And to me, there are three elementary steps that need to be taken in any case, that are think, mix, and design. And John, please, can you put the first think slide? So for think, when working on innovation, I'm sure you have an idea, but you need to shape it. You really need to think that it will be tested in an European level. So you have to push it forward and try to identify all the details. How are you going to do it? Which are your needs? Which are your shortcomings? Which are your strengths? And how are you going to deal with risk, for example? You have to check your idea, because maybe in your region it's very original, but maybe there are 3, 4, 5 other regions in Europe doing the same. So what has been already done elsewhere? How can you improve it? How can you mix similar approaches? So check in other sectors. Maybe you're working in agriculture and you may look into digital sciences to see if there are synergies or models to be copied or to be adapted. And look at yourself. Look at yourself, because it doesn't, it's not enough just with an idea and a very wonderful idea. You want to be able to do anything by yourself in an European project. So as to better identify your partners afterwards, you need to know which are your weaknesses, and if you're really ready to share, and if you're going to be able to lead the project, even if it's your idea, or if you need someone else to lead it. Next slide, please. So that comes for help and collaboration, and for identifying the best human organizing resources that you may have for your project. First, check what is already being done or is going on. So you have multiple databases like CORDIS or KEEP for Interreg projects, or the EITs or the key KICs, and all these multipliers that the European Union has installed, so the knowledge is accessible to everybody. You must also check with the European institutions which are the main lines and the priorities. Now we are sure it is the Green Deal, but you may check your project against the Economic and Social Committee proposals on entrepreneurship and innovation, or in the territorial dimension of innovative strategies, so at the Committee of the Regions. Check what is going on at the political level, so you can justify your project being funded by the European funds. Go to, of course, virtual now, events, the European Info Days, the European Innovation Week, the hearings of the European institutions on the topics, but also locally. Test your ground. Do what you say, but also hear what to do. And just a simple tip, LinkedIn is mine. we have now going on a project on youth and innovation, which is called Atlantic Youth Creative Hubs, that was risen from a post in a LinkedIn European Projects group, and this worth 4 million euros. So believe me, giving LinkedIn a chance is worth a try. And of course, join a network. For example, the Atlantic Cities, we are called Atlantic Cities, but we have positions for observers, so universities, chambers of commerce, or entrepreneurs organizations, because as our former president, Philippe Duron, former mayor of Cannes, said, a city is more than a council, than a city council. So work with different stakeholders and work with experiences of stakeholders and build on the experience of networks. Of course, I will sell mine, but there are more. Could be a key point for fostering your initiative. Next slide, please. Design. You are not building a project, you're not building your project, you're building a partnership. An European project will last at least 2 or 3 years, and it may last more if we're speaking about RIS3. So verify every cost, verify every linkage that you may make with your partners, if they are fit to the role, if they have experience, and if they don't have, what can you provide for them to keep the path of an European project. Verify the ethics, verify the communication strategy, and both of these items should be done before even you start writing your project. Don't do it at the last time because you have to fill in the form. And once you have done all this, you can start checking EU calls against your own strengths. So when you're speaking about innovation, everybody thinks, okay, let's go to Horizon 2020. But Horizon 2020 is big, it's hard, and there is a lot of competition. Maybe you want to start smaller in a different program. Like if you're doing social innovation, you can go for the Euro for Citizens program. Or if you're a small enterprise, you can go for individual grants. So try to start small, and afterwards you will be big. You cannot be lead partner without any European experience, for example. And share as much as you can because of intellectual property, but share and try to find better readers for your idea, for your application form. And among those beta readers and the support that you can get, think that there are contact points of the European Union everywhere. You have the Europe Direct service. You have the national contact points for Horizon 2020, but also for other programs like Erasmus+. And also you can use networks, as mine, of course, as a contact point to identify the best fit between your project and the European Union possibilities. For instance, we do that for our member cities, that they may come for seeking help, identifying the best opportunities for their own urban projects. Or every month we send a newsletter with 30 opportunities in the European Union aligned with our own priorities as a network. So try to get support, to speak with people, and to know your ground even before you open the Word and start filling in the form. And that's all for my side. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Tamara. What we're going to do now, folks, is we're going to go backwards a little bit just to the questions and answers section. So if there are any questions for our presenters, I think there was one came in here. So let me just find it. Okay, so a question for Xavier. In keeping with the quadruple helix model of innovation, how do you involve the consumer in co-design? Can you give any tips to optimally involve all actors or academics, industry or public from your implementation of the action plan? So
yeah, thank you, John, for the question, and thank you, Geraldine, for the question. I'm going to go back to Tamara's presentation, and one of the the things that she said. She stressed the importance of building a partnership, and that's what we try to do on a daily basis with our stakeholders. We work with them on a two-way all over the year. On the one hand, what we do is to have a constant dialogue with them on a daily basis. Each of the persons that are working in the innovation department in Fomento San Sebastián, we work with different stakeholders. So we have that daily basis dialogue with them to see not only what's the results of different programs that we design, but also to detect the needs and problems that they have. So at the end of the year, we can have a wide approach of what's going on the city and the needs that they have, to design those programs. Because every year we evaluate what the different results that we had in those programs that we design for our stakeholders, and we have a reflection on what happened all over the year. Besides this, we also have different workshops with them, B2B meetings with them at the end of the year, so we can co-design with them the next program, the program that we're going to design for the year that is coming. And finally, a really important moment for us in the year is the Donosti Innovation Week that we organize every year. This year was the 7th edition, and what we try to do for a whole week is to gather all the most all the stakeholders that we can during this week, and try to discuss and reflect about the challenges that we have as a city, the challenges that we have sector by sector and stakeholder by stakeholder. And by this idea, I mean stakeholders from the educational system, technological centers, different business and companies. So with all this information, we try to make them involved in the co-design process of the different public programs that we launch every year.
Very good. Thanks very much, Xavi. And keeping an eye there for different questions. There's just one for Claudia. So Claudia, maybe you could turn back on your video for a second, if you're still with us.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in your presentation about the that you were implementing a pilot action. So maybe some of the audience aren't fully familiar with the pilot action. So maybe you could just explain how that happens and how ecoRIS played a role in I suppose how that pilot action came about, I guess.
Yeah. The Interreg Europe program foreseen for the last 2 years of the project to present the request to obtain some few funds more to implement a specific pilot action. The pilot action, the main components of the pilot action are to be built around the exchange of experience that each partner said during the first 3 years of projects, and try to identify a specific need at territorial level to ask to implement some more activities compared with the previous foreseen in the project. So we identify a specific need in a very small area of our territory, linked to the HEAD that was a specific topic that we approached during these the first 3 years of activities. We identify a specific good practice in that we study and exchange during the first 3 years of ecoRIS3 project. This good practice was presented to us by Fomento San Sebastián, thanks to one of their stakeholders, that was Biodonostia, that work a lot on the ecosystem, on the local ecosystem, on the e-health topics. we try to identify some potential for transfer this knowledge and this experience on our territory, and we present to the Inter-Europe program our idea to be supported, and this is more or less the way we develop. I have to say that I'm very proud of this pilot action, because it's a really a good example to bring some activities on the territory. And also I have been informed that we were the only Italian subject to present and to obtain a pilot action financed at national level. So for us, it's really a positive experience.
Superb. Thanks very much. I think that'll help the audience in terms of how these pilot actions work. There's one more question from Alan Whiteside. So Alan has, or mentions in his question, there's much of the discussion has been on cities, but could you please discuss how you included rural communities in your activities? So are there any of the presenters that would like to say, or mention about how the rural communities are connected into the activities for the action plans? So if anyone has something to contribute, I guess you can pop on your video.
Well, I represent a very rural territory. Actually, we have just a couple of rather small cities. So most of our companies which we work through are actually located outside of cities. Also the ones which now are working on the projects, but this requires, of course, a bit more work on building the ecosystem, building cluster where they want to cooperate, so that you can approach them when you know them for 3 or 4 years. You talk with them about what kind of activities they would like to have. Then a couple of years later, you see, okay, this is what you were asking for. Now we have this type of support. Would you be interested to participate? And then they are getting involved. But it requires a lot of energy to go to them, to see them. Actually, you just can't say, okay, I will organize everything in our office in the city. You have to sometimes visit them. You sometimes have to organize an experience meeting. We have an innovation week every year where we ask companies to open their doors, and then we facilitate that. A lot of our staff also goes and sees how these companies are operating, and also we invite some pupils. Of course, this year when we have COVID conditions, it will be much more difficult from one hand. On the other hand, accessibility is making it easier, because now if they are in a rural territory and they still have seen announcement, if you have them in your list of recipients of information, they can get online. And even we got on some of our events companies which had never previously attended events, definitely, and from rural areas.
Good, thank you very much. So I think we've run over by a small chunk of time, so I'm just going to finalize things there and thank everyone for their both their presentations today and for all of the effort and time that went into putting all of that together. So thanks very much to all our panelists from the international and Irish perspectives, all the way through to the action plans and to the tips, I suppose, in terms of getting involved with the EU projects then from Tamara. Thanks to our audience, I suppose, for connecting today and for asking your questions, for your interest in the topic. In terms of keeping up to date with what's happening in ecoRIS and how the project is progressing as we finalize the implementation of our action plans, there's two main ways, I suppose, to interact with us: through the website, which the link will be sent to all the participants afterwards. And again, I'm sure a lot of you have clicked on that link previously and would have looked at the website. And through our Twitter account as well, we'll keep you right up to date with the implementation of the different pilot actions, how the action plans are actually progressing, and the news from the partnership. We hope to meet next year face to face, all going well with COVID vaccines. It will be fantastic if we can close off the project towards the end of next summer by meeting as a partnership in a group face to face in Fomento San Sebastian. So that would be fantastic. And again, I would hope that we would be able to make that meeting and the workshops that we have there live, so that people can join us from all across Europe and further afield.